with other words, hands over his personal complexes, then you get slowly and nilly-willy into the situation of a sort of authority,
yes.
A point of, you become a point of reference. You know you are in possession of all the important items in a person's development. Now you see, that creates an emotional relationship to the analyst, and that is what Freud called the transference.
Yes.
Which is a central problem of analytic psychology. It is just so as if these people had handed out their whole existence, and that can have very peculiar effects upon the individual. Either they hate you for it or they love you for it,
yes.
But you are not indifferent to them.
But I never felt as though I had too much transference. It didn't last too long because Jung, the one nice thing about, or the good thing about him was he gave so much of himself. He just gave you everything he had. So it wasn't as though you had a hangover. You got it all, you know?
I never felt in awe of him. I just thought sometimes he was funny. When we used to have a little argument about God, he said, you know, I'm not so sure about God. I'm perfectly willing if he shows up, fine. I used to say to you, of course, if he shows up, he'll probably look like you. And, I guess that I thought before I got mad at him, I thought that he would have some kind of a solution to life's problems. Then I found I had to find the solution myself, which I suppose was what he did, brings you to that point.
We didn't know whether we were fish, flesh or fowl, and we had to find ourselves anew. I dreamt that Jung was a Protestant clergyman standing at the pulpit giving a sermon, and we were all in the pews, and when he finished his sermon, all the others got up and began to chant mandala, mandala, the way they might in Christian times have said Hosanna. And this represented a worshipful attitude to Jung that was laughable, as you can imagine. So I thought, I hate to tell Jung this dream, but I did. And he said, well, of course you should feel that way. I was simply projecting my own Protestant background, making Jung a father figure, making the other people into a group which they were not.
Freud always wanted to break a transference and to resolve it. To resolve it and to bring people to life again, down to the adaptation to life again. Mm-hmm. But Jung had another point of view, had the feeling as long as we have a strong transference, one must serve it, because he said there is a greater personality involved in transference. And we don't know what this greater personality has in storage, and so we must serve it. And that was tremendously difficult for Jung. He often told us, you see, I should have 10 lives in order really to follow the development of the integration process so deeply as he did with us all.
Yes.
But that was also what interested him. He many times said, without you women, I couldn't have developed my psychology.
I had a case that was an intelligent young woman. She was a student of philosophy, very good mind, where one could expect easily that she would see that I am not the parental authority. But she was utterly unable to get out of this delusion. And in such a case, one always has recourse to the dreams. It is just as if one would ask the unconscious, now what do you say to such a condition? You see, she says of the unconscious, of course I know you are not my father, but I just feel like that, it is like that, I depend upon you. And I say, now we will see what the unconscious says. Now the unconscious produces dreams in which I really assumed a very curious role. You know, she was the little infant, she was sitting on my knees, I held her in my arms, I was a very tender father to the little girl, you know, and more, her dreams became emphatic in that respect, namely that I was a sort of child, and she is a very little, frail human thing, you know, and quite a little girl in the hands of an enormous being. And the last dream of that series was, I cannot tell you all the dreams, was that it was out in nature. I stood in a field of wheat, an enormous field of wheat that was ripe for harvest. And I was a child. And I held her in my arm like a baby. And the wind was blowing over that field of wheat. Now you know, when the wind is blowing over wheat field, these waves in the wheat field. Yes. And with these waves, I swayed like that, putting her as if it were to sleep, you know. And she felt as being in the arms of a God, of the Godhead. Mm-hmm. And I thought, now the harvest is ripe. Yes. And I must tell her. And I told her, you see, what you want and what you project into me, because you are not conscious of it, is you have the idea of a deity you don't possess. Therefore you see it in me. Yes. That clicked. She certainly became aware of an entirely heathenish image. Yes. That comes fresh from the archetype. She had not the idea of a Christian God or of an Old Testament Yahweh. It was a heathenish God, you see, a God of nature, of vegetation. He was the wheat himself. He is the spirit of the wheat, the spirit of the wind. And she was in the arms of that Newman. No. Now, that is the living experience of an archetype. Now, that made a tremendous impression upon that girl, and instantly it clicked. She saw what she really was missing, that missing value, that was in the form of a projection in myself and made myself indispensable to her. Yes. And then she saw it is not indispensable, because it is, as the dream says, she is in the arms of that archetypal idea. Now that is a luminous experience, you see. And that is the thing that people are looking for. Yes. An archetypal experience that gives them an incorruptible value. You see, they depend upon other conditions, they depend upon their desires, their ambitions, depend upon other people, because they have no value in themselves, they have nothing in themselves, they are only rational, and they are not in the possession of a treasure that would make them independent. But when that girl can hold that experience, then she doesn't depend anymore. She cannot depend anymore, because that value is in herself. And that is a sort of liberation. Yeah. And that is, of course, makes her complete, you know, in as much as she can realize